Hello and welcome to the podcast of English 360. This is Robert at your service, helping you to learn English better and faster. So today's topic is town and city. Often we wonder what our towns are like, and for those of you who are doing exams such as the IELTS exam or the English exams in general, this is a very good podcast because it will help you with lots of vocabularies and ideas that you can use to talk about your town. If you live in a town, if you don't live in a town, guess what? You can talk about your village. Or perhaps you live in a massive city like New York or Berlin or some other big cities around the world. I'm sure there are plenty, and my knowledge of those is limited. Well, I know one. Delhi is a big one, right? Tokyo is the other one I know. So if you live in a big city, you want to know a little bit about it, unless you're living under a rock, which means that you don't get out very much. What about those people who don't get out very much? There are lots and lots of those people who don't really go anywhere and they live indoors. Please get out and about. Enjoy the life outside, the sunshine, the people, get in touch with other people, live your city if you can. So often the words city and town are used interchangeably, but city is generally bigger. So Paris would be a city, but Florence would be a town, for example, Cork is another town. You might say Dublin is a town, London definitely is a city, Newcastle may be a town. So I digress. So let's get back to what we were talking about. Normally, when you talk about your city, your town, or your village, you talk about its population. So you can say we are heavily populated or we are a sparsely populated town. Many places in the US are very sparsely populated. There is hardly anyone living and life is very rural. You have lots of countryside, you have crops growing and agriculture and people investing heavily in agriculture. For example, plantations of cotton, wheat, barley, corn, etc. So you don't get a lot of people living in those areas because you need a lot of land, don't you? You need soil, you need rain. I wonder what it's like to live in a sparsely populated area, because I'm from London, so I don't really know what it's like to live in a small town or a village. It must be interesting, but sometimes it might also get boring. I don't know, might get a bit quiet. Not boring is not the right word. It might get a bit quiet. So the main business and shopping center of the town lies at its heart. Okay, so if you live in London, for example, the square mile is the area where you will have the most shops, perhaps the highest density of population. So that's exactly where you will find lots of tourists, museums, etc. And the traffic system can be rather complicated in these areas as well. You may have to learn how to get about from one place to another because many roads are one way. And so you can only go in one direction, and some of the roads are very narrow. You might not be comfortable driving around in small villages if the roads are very narrow. So that's one thing to take into consideration. That's one of the advantages of living in countryside, really, that you don't have to put up with the traffic. There is very little because people don't like to drive around in villages or small hamlets. Hamlet is even smaller than a village. Because it's so hard, the alleys are so narrow that you can't drive through them, or at least it's very difficult. You need to be quite dexterous to move around these alleys, so you just give up, right? And this is the same in many small hamlets and villages in Italy, France, etc. When you're talking about towns, though, and cities, you need to talk about the fashionable districts. For example, if you're in London, the fashionable district may be Mayfair, Could be the centre, Oxford Street, or it could be Belgravia as well. There are lots of areas, neighbourhoods with lively atmosphere, like the centre of the town. Or perhaps it's not the centre of the town. If you live in Rome, for example, it might be the Trastevere area, or it might be the Pinedo, they call it here. If you live in Paris, it might be the area where you have all the cafes and bars of the artists. So it depends where you are. You do want to visit art galleries, etc. So those are also important places where tourists and locals tend to go. So let's talk about facilities. So every town and every city has facilities. Well, most of them do anyway, unless you are from a town in the north, in the northern part of Siberia, where it snows so much that possibly the only facility they might have outdoors is the ice skating rink. So facilities, when it comes to sports, we're talking about swimming pools, sports centres. We also call them leisure centres. Golf courses, if you like golf, tennis courts, football pitch, skating rink, athletics track, and so on, really, and bicycle track as well. Don't forget, these are the kind of sports facilities that you need if you want to be fit. Yeah. Have you ever thought about being fit? If you have, do facilities matter to you? Do they matter? Do you like to have these facilities in and around your area, or perhaps you want to have them, or perhaps you don't care. So next thing about facilities. So in terms of culture, you have theatres, opera houses, concert halls, radio station, TV stations, art galleries, and also film theatres. So that would be considered cultural as well, even though that's like entertainment too, isn't it? Theatres are part of culture because unlike the past where theatres were like cinemas, people just went there to have fun, to watch a nice play and have a nice laugh about that. Nowadays, theatres are more like places where people tend to go when they're feeling a bit posh, or they really like a play, or perhaps they really like a play and they want to watch it. But it's not for everyone's taste. It doesn't cater to everyone's taste. That's what I mean. In terms of catering, accommodation and nightlife, restaurants are one which are important. Takeaways, of course, hotels, B&Bs, hostels, discos, nightclub. What else do you have? Bars, cafes. Just remember, in some countries, bars are places where you drink alcohol as well as, other drinks. While in other countries, they also serve breakfast or hot drinks or hot beverages, they call them, drinks. So it's a bit strange. It's a different use of the word. So in the UK, cafe or cafeteria would be a place where you drink hot coffee or have breakfast in the morning if you haven't had it at home. And then bars would be where you get a drink. It's slightly different from a pub. A pub can be a place where you go and you have a big beer. Bar tends to be a bit more sophisticated, upper class, if you want to call it, posh, a bit higher brow. You might find prawn sandwiches in bars, while in pubs you'll find packet of crackers and a pint of bitter. So there you go. Transport facilities, you need bus, you need taxis, you need car rentals, you need car parks, you need, did I say bus service? Yes, you need undergrounds, of course, and you need private car hire service like the Uber, and can't remember the other one, what it was called. So transportation facilities are fundamental to a good living in a city. You need those, right? Although, if you're walking, you can burn those calories that you're trying to take off by going to the gym an hour or two. You can go to the gym for an hour and work that fat off. But just imagine, if your office is not far away, you get out a little early in the morning, walk to the office, and you've burned half those calories, and you've had a nice walk, right? So I have no idea why people drive when they can walk. I understand if it's like miles and miles away, and that makes sense. You wouldn't probably get there in time, but if you're quite close to your office, like, within a mile and a half distance, about 2 kilometers, you can easily walk that distance. You can easily get there on foot. Just stroll down in the morning, have a nice walk, listen to nice podcasts like this one, of course, is the best one, yeah. I'm just joking. And, get some light, gentle exercise early in the morning. That's what I do every morning. So that seems to work really well. Right. What kind of problems do we have in cities? If you asked me, there are tons and tons of problems. You got problems at home with your wife and girlfriend and husband and boyfriend, for example. Those aside, when you go out, you got other problems. You've got traffic problems like traffic jams when traffic is either not moving or moving very slowly. There's rush hour traffic, which means that basically if you get out in the morning around about 8 o'clock, you will suffer from traffic. You will get stuck in traffic because that is the time when everybody's out. So that's called the rush hour. And you can give up all hope. You can just sit back in your car, either get really stressed and freak out at the people, yay, you get out of the way, or you can just take it easy, put some music on, and there is nothing you can do. There's hardly anything you can do. You can't literally wiggle your way through traffic and get to work on time, because if you're late, you're late. Okay, so traffic can be a problem. It is a huge stress causer. Yeah, it is behind a lot of accidents as well, because when people get stressed, they get cranky and they get unbearable, and they lose it. Their sense of kindness just dissipates, and they become beasts, like animals. Probably animals are better behaved in those cases. Then you get other problems like vandalism. You get people who do graffitis on the wall. That's considered to be vandalism, or just literally pointless destruction of property. Just breaking down things needlessly. Who knows why people do these things? I have no idea, but it could be because there are a lot of people out of work and they have nothing else to do than to go around and vandalize places. Then you have overcrowding, that you have a lot of people living in the same area, and that is not good, because that does not help the stress levels. You have little parking, you have crowded supermarkets, crowded parks, and you need space. I remember reading this somewhere. Space is the ultimate luxury, so you need space to survive. We are 7 billion. We don't all need to live in one city, for goodness sake. Imagine that, imagine living with lots of space. That would be such a good thing. Right, then you have pollution, which is another problem, which is behind a high number of deaths in this country, or in Europe in general, also in Europe and around the world, literally. And that is caused by traffic and factories. It causes deterioration in health and leads to cancers of all types and kinds. So let's talk about how to describe a city. Some of the adjectives that you can use are things like picturesque. If you go to Edinburgh, it's extremely picturesque. It's beautiful. You can call it historic. Your city could be historic, like Rome is, for example. It could be spacious, like some cities in America. It could be elegant, magnificent, lively, deserted. Bustling, with lots of movement and people going in and out. Packed, meaning very crowded. Filthy, absolutely disgusting, like some cities are in the world due to lack of good sanitary condition. And it could be run down. It means in a very bad condition, like some cities are in in South America. So when you're asked to talk about your city, you can mention all these things, some of these things, or something totally different. So let me talk to you about London, where I'm from. London has changed and is constantly changing. Every single year you see changes that you don't recognize. You say, what happened here? Wasn't there a building here? It's gone now. It's a good example of what can be done in a city to improve the quality of life. So the first thing I would say about London, that it is a metropolitan city. Lots of different peoples and cultures come together. Having said that, not all the people are truly integrated. There are areas where you only see black people, areas with only Southeast Asians, areas with all white people. So it's not 100% integrated, as I was saying earlier. And this is something that Londoners can and should work on. In terms of facilities, it has a lot to offer. All those things that I was mentioning earlier, like sports facilities, swimming pool. We have swimming pools which are literally either free for people or they cost very little. So you don't need a long-term membership to join a swimming pool. You can go on a daily basis, just pay your entry fee, like £1, £2, £3, and go in there for a swim. So that's the swimming pool for you. There are many sports centres. Some of them are free, some of them are private and you need to pay for them. And there are lots of football pitches as well, which are open where people can play. So I guess life has changed and kids are not outdoors anymore as much as they used to be. I mean, I remember spending my childhood and my teenage outdoors. We were never in. We were always outdoors. We were meeting up with friends, going out to the centre, playing football, going out to the shopping centre, doing things, walking around a lot. We were a bunch of really skinny kids. I think I was already 5'9", about 1 meter 75 inch, and I weighed around 60 kilograms. That's how skinny I was. And my friends were pretty much like me, maybe, a bit bigger or perhaps a bit bulkier, but we were all very skinny. We were always outdoors. And we didn't have our parents running after us with snacks saying, hey, eat this, please, come on. You can't survive without food. You have to have a snack. There were times we didn't have lunch, so it was fine. It didn't kill us. We were fine. So getting back to the topic of London has changed because you see far fewer people outdoors, especially young people outdoors nowadays, than you used to see in the past. So consequently, there are fewer areas where people can take part in sport for free because there is literally no need. But still, parks are everywhere. You can, there's always a park in a neighborhood. So if you want to walk your dog, if you want to go for a quick run, you can do that. They're not very big, but they are there. So that's something else. London boasts of a magnificent transportation system. The tubes, the trains, the overground trains, the underground trains. There are no trams, as far as I know. Buses, taxis, minicabs are like taxis, but they're cheaper. They offer a fantastic setup. They offer a brilliant transportation system. So if you work in the centre, then you can easily get there by catching a train. So it's divided into various zones. You have, I believe, 1 to 4 zones which are close to the center. Then you have 5, 6A, 6B, 6C. So as you get further out, the number increases. So, for example, if you want to travel from zone 6 to zone 1, you'll pay an enormous amount of money. You'll pay a lot. So they offer these Oyster cards or travel cards that you can buy on a monthly basis, so you don't have to pay as much. But the transportation in London is highly functional, highly effective, and it gets the job done. It moves millions and millions of people around the city. And the other thing good about London is the fact that it's well organized. So you don't see these crammed, overcrowded areas that you see in other parts of the world. You have a lot of houses. You have some apartment buildings, but you have a lot of houses, which allows people to live with more space, which is what you want, really, don't you? You want your own garden. You want your own room where you can paint or have a cup of tea and look outside the window. Whatever you want to do, whatever swings your boat. So that's very important. But in order to buy a house in central London, you'll pay through your nose. You'll pay a lot of money. It'll cost you an arm and a leg. So most people move out of London or move to the outskirts of London, which is, the zone 6, basically. So I would say London is rather historic in places. There are Gothic buildings, Victorian age buildings, as well as other times, as well as Tudor. It's also very picturesque, especially the Thames. If you happen to be in London sometimes and you sit down at a cafe and enjoy the scenery, it's beautiful. Yeah, the Thames is great. It's great. It's bustling with tourists when tourists are there, and there's always something happening. They're either fixing a road, doing works, building a new skyscraper or something. So you could say it's a town which never stops. So we have New York, which never sleeps. We have London, which never stops. So that's pretty much it. If you want to talk about your town, there are lots of things you can say, and you can use some of these vocabulary that I mentioned to talk about your town, unless you don't want to talk about your town because you're really fed up with life there. In that case, you can talk about another town, some utopian town that you liked. But trust me, it's nice to. I hope you like this podcast on towns and how to describe a town, really. I didn't want to put in too many words and expressions because then they get lost in a way, but I think there is a nice balance of expressions and new words here. Let me know what you think. Drop a question in the comment section if you have a request, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye for now and peace.